Hello, beloved. I am Mother Miriam, and last time, our first time together, I told you that I grew up in a Jewish home as Rosalind Moss. Mother Miriam is my religious name. I come from Brooklyn. You probably can't tell that, but we come from Brooklyn. And all of us Jewish, my mother, my father, all four grandparents, Russian and Hungarian Jews, and we grew up in a wonderful conservative Jewish home. And where we left off last time was my explaining the Passover and our celebration each year of our deliverance from Egypt, an event that happened 3,500 years ago, and yet when we celebrated it in our home every year with extended family or in their home, we knew that we were celebrating something that happened 3,500 years ago, but in a sense, at least in my experience, it was as if the past was brought through time and made present for me, and I think more than for me, because we are the people of God and we were delivered. We went through the Red Sea. It felt like that with all the celebration, celebrating our deliverance from over 400 years of freedom. It was our deliverance. God delivered us with his outstretched arm, and we waited for him, and we believed his promises. And I mentioned last time that every Passover, it was somebody's turn to go to the door to see if the Messiah had come. And this particular Passover, when I was 11 and my brother David, who had been bar mitzvahed, had turned 13, it was my turn to go to the door to see if the prophet Elijah was there, to see if Messiah had come. And I looked out on a 12th floor apartment building, the door that had been left ajar for them, and we had a plate for Elijah to see if they had come. And they would come to the 12th floor of our apartment building in Brooklyn. What else do you think? And I looked out in the hallway, and nobody was there. And I turned around to the table and announced to the people that he had not come. Messiah hadn't come. We continued with the Seder. This went on every single year. And so we would leave full of hope. He's going to come. That's not even an issue. So he didn't come this year. He'll come next year. He knows what he's doing. And I mentioned, just as we ended last time, that I went to bed as that 11-year-old, and I wondered, is there really a Messiah? Will he really come? But I believed it. I think we believed it. I can't speak for my younger sister and my older brother, how the depth of their belief, or my parents or family, but in general, we did. And he's going to come. And that's the end of it. It's the only hope the world had. We knew that. The only hope the world had to have peace, to make sense, for us to be together as a Jewish people again. We knew that. As we got into our teens, my brother David started searching. And I don't know when he started searching. I mentioned last time that I was 10 years old when I wondered why mankind was on the earth and what we're here for, and never found an answer to that, but I really didn't look. But David did. And he searched. He searched and he searched and he read and he read, and I didn't search and I didn't read. But David, in his teenage years, became an atheist and let us know that. An atheist, meaning that he concluded there's no God. And in my teenage years, I was astounded at that. I can't know there's a God. I mean, it's faith. How does anybody know that? But how can you know there's no God? And I thought to myself, David, how can you say there's no God? Do you know what you'd have to know there's no God? How could anybody know that? You'd have to know everything to conclude there's no God. How could that be the case? And I figured in my teenage years, and even into my early 20s, I am because of what is. If what is means there's no God, therefore I am. If what is means there is a God, therefore I am. And my knowledge or lack of it doesn't determine what is. So why know? How is knowing going to make a difference? Does that make sense to you? It sure made sense to me. Well, David went on reading and reading and reading, and embraced at times different isms and all of that, and I never did. I figured, you know, how can you know? And even if you could know, how would knowing change your life? Well, one day, we were in our early 30s, and we were both in New York. David upstate New York with his family. I was in Manhattan. And I got a call that David's wife, he married an atheist. She had been a nominal Protestant. And both of them really atheists, and they figured, well, they'll just raise their children to do their own thing, and when they're old enough, they'll decide for themselves, no problem. But they had 3 children at the time, and now they have 4. And Daniel, who was the oldest, he would come home from school and start asking questions. What are we? Do we have a religion? All of that. And so my brother and his wife figured they should start searching to give the children a sense of identity somehow, maybe choose a religion. My brother didn't reject the Jewish faith, it just didn't have all the answers for him. And so he went on searching, and so did his wife. And she attended a little Baptist church not far from their house and gave her life to Christ. And my brother called me one day, and he said, Rosalind Moss, my name Roz, nickname, he wanted me to know that his wife had become a Christian through this Baptist church, and that the children were going to be raised as Christians, now 4. They were going to be raised to know Jesus Christ. The name was not allowed in my house. We didn't know anything about him. Well, we knew that he wasn't for us, and we didn't know anything else, really. I don't think we knew anything else. I never knew he was Jewish. Never, ever knew he was Jewish. So we had the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and whoever Jesus Christ was, the rest of the world had him. I had no idea about anything. Oh, the other thing was we were not allowed to pronounce his name. I never said his name my entire life. Severe consequences. So his name was not to be pronounced, and he wasn't for us, and that's all I ever knew. David's wife came home believing, and David agreed, even though David hadn't come to any faith yet, he agreed the children would be allowed to be raised as Baptist Christians. And he just wanted me to know that that's where they were at. Well, I love my brother David about as much as any sister could love a brother, and respected him my entire life. We were now in our 30s, and I hung up the phone, and I thought, David, what happened to you? How could you, I didn't say this to him, but I thought it. How could you love your children and let them be raised to believe in a man, prophet, teacher, whoever Christ is? We're Jews. And if there's a God, we have a direct connection. We don't need to go through anybody. I was just heart-stricken. I couldn't believe my brother being so careless with his children. And so one day in the summer of 1975, I think it was, a long time ago, some of you weren't born yet, I was invited to their house, 2-hour drive, and I went. And Sunday morning came, and my brother's wife said, we're going to church. Do you want to come with us? Well, why would I want to come to a Baptist church? But I wanted to see what my brother was allowing his children to be raised to believe. And so I went. And my brother went because I was going, and he had been before. And there I sat in a fair-sized, medium to small Baptist church, with in the middle of all the people, with my brother and his wife and the children. And the choir was singing a song I'd never heard in my life before, but I remember it. Grace, grace. Any of you Baptists out there, you'll sing it with me. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Grace, the choir was singing that. Grace that is greater than all our sin. And I tell you, beloved, I don't know what happened, but it felt like a 10-pound brick of love had been put on my heart. Heavy, 10 pounds of love, a brick. And I sat there thinking, I was in the middle of a couple of hundred people. but it wasn't their love. It wasn't human love. It wasn't of the people. I don't know what it was. I never felt that love before. And then I sat there thinking, sin? What's sin? What's that got to do with me? I wasn't even sure that God existed at the time. Who am I going to sin against? Mankind is my equal. Men, women, they're my equal. Who am I going to sin against? So I was hit with a love that wasn't mine and a sin that was, the first time in my life. And after that service, I was trying to control myself because I didn't want to cry, and I didn't want anybody to know I was affected by this stuff in any way. And when the service concluded, I just broke down crying. I just couldn't handle it. And my sister-in-law started telling me about Jesus Christ. And I looked at her and I said, you get away from me with those words. I know what I'm feeling. That's got nothing to do with it. I don't want you to mention that. Well, I went back home the next morning, and my brother, who couldn't figure out my response or why I even was emotional about it, he gave me a little black book when I left the house at 6 o'clock the next morning to take a train back to Manhattan to go to work. And he said, Roz, read this. And he just handed it to me without his wife seeing it. And I said, okay, and I put it in my purse, and I went on the train, and I took it out. Will you guess what it is? It was a New Testament. I said, I don't believe this. My brother gave me this thing, this New Testament. It's not Jewish. I've never read it. I'm not supposed to read it. What is he doing giving it to me? And I opened it on the train without trying to hide it so nobody would see me reading it, even though nobody knew me. And it was Greek to me. I know now it was Greek, but I couldn't even figure it out. I wasn't interested. I couldn't understand it. I wasn't interested in doing something even because somebody else wanted me to, even though somebody else was my brother. I put it away, not interested. I had a couple of moments after that, walking through Central Park and being engulfed in a little tunnel at one point, knowing that something supernatural existed. And experiencing once or twice a sense of peace that the world, if I want to quote scripture, the world can't give and the world doesn't have. It was magnificent, and it had nothing to do with me or anything I knew or believed or didn't believe. And then I met with my brother one day. I went to visit them a second time, and David said to me, because he never stopped searching, he said, you know, I just came across this article that said there's such a thing as Jews, Jewish people on the face of the earth who believe that Jesus Christ, I was 32 years old and had never pronounced those words, was the Jewish Messiah the rest of us are waiting for. Well, I'd never heard it before. I don't think I've ever been in such shock about anything in my life. I said to David, I don't care who believes what in this world. Everybody can do their own thing. But Jewish people believe that he's the Messiah, that the only hope the world has came already 2,000 years ago, and we don't know anything about it. We never heard about it. We're not in Jerusalem like we're supposed to be. He didn't set up his kingdom. He didn't bring peace. Life doesn't make sense. And he left. He left. We missed the whole thing. The world missed the whole thing. The only hope the world had. And we missed it. And I said, David, it's insane. You can't believe that. And he said to me, Roz, I didn't say it's true. He said, but that's what this article said, that there are Jews out, and they're all out in California, who believe this. And they call themselves all kinds of names, Jews for Jesus, Hebrew Christian, Messianic Jews. And I said, look, David, there's a lot of troubled people in the world, and Jews are just as entitled to be troubled as everybody else. You cannot believe in Jesus and be Jewish, but you could believe in Jesus and have trouble. So if there are troubled Jews, that's got nothing to do with me, and it certainly has nothing to do with truth. Well, through circumstances, a year later, I went out to California, maybe 6 months later, I forget now. I went out to California, and I was walking through UCLA, an arts and crafts festival, on a Sunday afternoon, and I saw off in the distance this fellow, hippie-ish looking, in his 20s, with a beard, handing out some kind of tracts. And he had a T-shirt on, and it said, Jews for Jesus. And I remembered what my brother told me. And I couldn't believe. I said, oh no, they really exist. These people really exist. I couldn't believe it. And so I went up to him to experience that and tell David to mock them. And to write my brother David and say, David, remember the article. They really exist, these people out here. It's unbelievable. So I went up to talk to this fellow. His name was Mitch Glazer. Jewish. He and his wife, Zahava, both Jewish. Both believed that Jesus Christ was the Jewish Messiah, and not the Messiah only, but God come to earth. If I thought they were troubled, now I knew it. You can't be Jewish and believe in Christ. And every Jew knows that a man can't be God. And every Jew knows that you cannot look at God and live. So forget it. You forget that. They're troubled people. And he gave me a little flyer. And the little flyer said, if being born hasn't given you much satisfaction, try being born again. And it had a little happy face on it. And I took that flyer, and I desperately tried not to show it. But that little tract sent a knife right through my heart. Because, as I mentioned last time, I had everything the world could give. I was running a company. I was hired to open up a company in San Francisco. I was working for a big advertising company. And I had all the money in the world. I was almost engaged to be married. I was in love. I lacked nothing this world could give except a reason to live inside. And here's a little flyer telling me I could be born again. I could go back in my mother's womb and come out a second time. How on earth could that be? I want to tell you that I followed these troubled Jews, what I thought were troubled Jews, around for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, for one reason. I knew that the faith they lived for, it was insane to me that such a thing could be true. But I knew what they lived for is what they would also die for. And for me, that was the only thing worth checking out. I'm not interested in comfort or something, crutch to hang on to or anything like that. The only thing to me worth living for is that which is worth dying for. Otherwise, why bother? We're going to continue this next time. So for tonight, beloved, ask God. If you doubt it, ask God before you go to sleep if He is real, if He loves you, and if He could show you that and the reason He created you. God bless you. Good night. We'll see you next time.